All right. So we're recording. So John, good to have you here, man.
Thanks, brother.
We actually know a lot of mutual friends. That you got referred to me from David Pere, right?
Yeah,
I believe that's
100%.
I didn't know you. I saw on your Instagram actually that you knew Craig Kurloff too. Are you friends with him?
Not like I wouldn't say like good friends. We met through Dave, went and had dinner, and then connected with him a little bit when I was back in the mortgage industry. But Dave and I are really good friends. And I think when I reached out to him, I was saying, just kind of telling him about what I was dealing with, with the current mastermind that I was in. I was like, man, actually, you know what? I was telling him, like I'm really just looking to scale at this point. He's like, dude, you got to talk to my buddy Chandler. So I just hung out with him. He's living in Colorado and virtually wholesaling. And I think at the time you guys were on track to do like 5 or 7 million or something like that.
Yeah, that point in time, I think when you helped you had like our best month ever, which is like 450,000.
Yeah. So like, I think I just followed you on Instagram, and then I saw you post something. It's like DM to scale. And I was like, all right, scale. It was like bet. You know what I mean?
I bet.
And then we signed up right after that. So best decision of my life, man.
Dude, you think so, bro? I mean, I hope.
Yeah, man.
Make sure. So sweet. Let's roll into it, John. So when did we meet? Was it like summer last year? Was it June? I think it was June, right?
Yeah, probably somewhere around there. Yeah, it was probably somewhere around there.
So let's take everyone through the story of kind of like just generally what you were doing before. I mean, because obviously where you started, what was like kind of like your rough high level journey, like kind of like what were some of the big things that you went through? Obviously, like California, you're in California. Talk a little bit about the market correction, what that was like, and then we'll get into the value.
Cool, yeah, for sure. So I actually started out just doing like launch control texting. I was a one-man show. I was in the military, like balling on a $60,000 a year salary, and then in my free time, I would send out as many texts as I could, hop on the phone with them. I had no idea what I was doing. Just try to convince someone to sell me their house. So I did that. Ended up meeting some guys that were flipping houses. So we started partnering kind of as I went into like the mortgage industry. Long story short, 2020, 2021, we were flipping a lot of houses. So like we were doing a mixture of SMS marketing, cold calling, stuff like that. And flipping, some of them were flipping, some of them were wholesaling. So talk about like the market correction. We got slapped by the market correction and flipping houses in California. And I could talk a little bit about that, probably like somewhere around like a half for the year, if I had to guess. But anyway, like we were wholesaling as well. And the fact that we were flipping, we'd have like big months. So, we had like 100K months, and then we'd have like crickets for 2 months. When I say crickets, like nothing, no deals at all. And we had a salary employee that we were paying probably, I don't know, 60, 70, maybe more, like $75,000 a year salary transaction coordinator. We had AMs, we had salary payroll, like lead managers and everything like that. So it was scary because, you lock up a deal and you have 3-4 months go by and you're renovating the property, but then like you might make 100K. Yeah, it might not make anything. So, so I think when I reached out to you, that's where I was. We were averaging at like, let's say $30,000 to $35,000 a month. And when I say averaging, it's because we'd hit like 100K or like a 50K flip every like 2-3 months. And so that was, it wasn't like a smooth sailing business model at all. It was like kind of always feeling like you're one step away from failure. And then we connected. And so that's kind of like where I was up before we met.
So let's talk about it. So I know like the biggest thing that we do for everyone when they first start in is implement like the KPIs. So like, tell me about that. Like, what did that do for you? Like, obviously, were you tracking any numbers? Were you doing anything like I know like that's like the thing that you always go back to. Like, that's like the biggest change for me.
Yeah, and I said the same thing. It was and it wasn't just the tracking, because everybody tracks their KPI. Well, I say that everybody should track their KPIs, right? Like, you don't have a business so you're not tracking your KPIs. But when we sat down for our first one-on-one call, we looked at my numbers, which I was tracking at the time. So I was tracking my leads. I think it was just leads, appointments, offers, and closings, right? Offers, contracts, closings. And so one of the first things that I noticed was my leads. So like, we did lead to net lead, right? That was something that we weren't measuring. But then when I started measuring it, I realized that I think 10% of my leads were actually picking up. So like my lead to net lead ratio was terrible. It was like 10%. And so like the first thing you and Gino looked at, you're like, bro, you got to attack that. Like, you got to tackle that first. And it's crazy because just that one little lever that we're pulling. Okay, well, let's say, I'm getting 100 leads a month, right? I was talking to 10 people, which maybe results in like one contract, like a month, maybe, right? Really, it would be like one contract every 2 months. And so what changed was now we started finding ways to implement it to where we could talk to 70 of those 100 leads, and then we could have 70 conversations, which that's how we like initially started getting steady contracts alone, was just that one little tweak of like going in, contract to net lead, like getting that up. And then from there, we started to identify like, okay, what is industry average, or what is perfect, right? Like, what does really good look like? So like now we know these numbers, right? Like, so my numbers look a little bit different now because I do all inbound, and at the time I was doing outbound, but like I know if I'm doing a 20% lead to net lead, that's bad. And so got to where we're at now, where we're consistently staying between a 75 to 80% lead to net lead, right?
Yeah.
And then our appointment to contract is anywhere from 28 to 31%, depending on like the week, right? So like being able to find like what the industry average is, what is good, like how to strive for it, and then hop on the ops call and talk about strategies to actually get that number higher. Like, that was the thing that helped me more than anything, because I didn't even know where I was sucking. Like, you just don't really know until you get in front of other people that are doing, multi-seven figures a year. And that's where it's like, okay, so this is why I suck. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think like a lot of it too is like, it's like not only just understanding like where you are compared to others too, but like whenever you know the numbers, like it allows you to maintain your business over time. Because like you might like when you're crushing it, you know why you're crushing it. And when you're doing bad, you know why you're doing bad. And then because of your numbers and like you can see the correlation, is you can just like dive into the problem scenarios or find out what did you do really good to help these numbers be better, or what did you do really bad to make these numbers bad, and like what can you go in there and fix or just keep doing more of. Because like another thing too, like you'll start to realize, I'm sure you've gotten to this point, but every lead source is different on the conversions.
For sure.
Every person in your team is different on their conversions. Like all these different factors go in, and then like you can just like copy and paste and train based on all the different things that are going on. So it allows you like just really have a much deeper understanding of what's happening. So
yeah, and I think like everybody wants to say like my situation's different. Like, oh, I know, like I'm different. Like, but the reality is every single time, and I've proven this like not only in this business, but back when I used to do mortgages too, it all just boils down to conversations and offers. And it's really like, it's like sales, right? It's a contact sport. So like I was telling you, like last month we were like looking at like, okay, why do we feel like we're having a slow month? It's like, okay, let's look at like the previous 30 days of activities. How many offers did we get out? And then like compared to the 30 days prior to that, it was like 80%. And lo and behold, 80% of the contracts. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not rocket science. It's just measuring your numbers, going back. And typically when you hear it enough, like I'll hop on the ops call and I'll be like, yeah, man, I just feel like I'm not really like speaking to that many of my leads. You're like, okay, well, like, what's your net lead ratio? Like, what's your, and then I'm like, oh, it's 50%. You're like, well, that's why you feel like that, because you're only speaking to 50% of your leads. And so like, what are you doing right now to fix that?
Or even it's a different issue, you know?
Yeah, 100%. So like maybe like you are speaking to your leads too, but like they're not going to appointments. So like
Hmm.
why? And maybe like it's a conversation that we're having with them. Maybe we're not double dialing or triple dialing our leads. Like there's always something. There's always a diagnosis. Like it's not like, and it's typically something when you're around the right people that you can figure out pretty quickly. Because you get a group of people like 10, 15 on a call, and you say, hey, I have this issue. So chances are somebody's dealt with it, or somebody on the call is smart enough to figure out like what your issue could be. You know?
Hmm.
So that's been the help.
100%.
That's been super helpful for me, man.
100%. No, I think that's like, that's a huge piece of the puzzle. This is like solving the right problems. You don't waste your time, you know, and the biggest
Yeah.
lever. Because like I
Yeah.
remember when we first found out about it, like the first thing we did was we like modeled out. We're like, oh shit, which one should we pick to do first? Because we suck at a lot of
Yeah.
them. And then like you just
Yeah.
take the one that was gonna make you the most money if you fixed
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is
It's the
funny.
cool thing about like being coached, right? Is like you typically always kind of know what you need to work on. Whereas like if you're not being coached, you kind of have to go figure that shit out. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And so that is like a huge benefit of like having like a group, or like you like I usually you know what to do. You just have to go do it. And you don't waste your own time trying to figure it out, which
Yeah.
I like. I don't like wasting
I hate wasting time. That's my biggest pet peeve, probably.
time. Yeah, man.
Right behind yeah, wasting time. Yeah, it's like funny. My girlfriend gets out of the car slow and I always roast her. I'm like, hurry the fuck up.
Dude, I'm probably like the most impatient person ever. So I feel you. I feel you 100% there.
Dude, so let's talk about the sales process. So
Mhm.
obviously like the understanding like your KPIs and like improving net lead percentage. But generally
Yeah.
speaking, like when you started, like, what is a sale like, how did you develop a
Dude.
sales process? Why did you do it? Like what has this done?
Yeah, man, that's a great point. And I haven't thought about this for a while. Um, so I had always had like scripts, because when I started Level Up, I had two acquisition managers. I always had some sort of script to follow, like an intro, but I didn't have like you said, a sales process. It wasn't a process. So
Mhm.
I was just like, okay, we got this lead and it didn't turn into a contract and we have no idea why. So it wasn't like we got a lead and it made it into a qualified lead, but it didn't make it into an appointment, because then we would know, right? It was like we got a lead, it didn't turn a contract. We were just confused. We're like, I don't know what could have gone wrong. And so one of the things that was really helpful that we started doing immediately was we took the script, like we just adopted the process, copy and paste at first. We eventually tweaked it a little bit, but same general process, but maybe like a little bit on the scripting. But like, okay, this is what we do. This is what's considered a net lead. This is what's considered an appointment. Like these are the things that they agreed to be considered an appointment. And then, the training was really helpful, but it was also, I think, what was even more helpful was being able to know where in the process we are like lacking. Okay, we were actually, for example, we had 10 net leads and we only got 2 of them into appointments. Like, why is that when they were inbound leads when we should be at about 40%? So like that was really helpful. And then it was very clear to see, okay, we should be converting at about 20% from our appointment to close. Like, what are we doing wrong? And then I could just go back and really quickly, I didn't have to listen to 300 calls. I had to listen to like maybe 10, because I was like, okay, I'm seeing that we're booking the appointments. Let's say we're booking, 40% of our net leads are turning into appointments. But out of those appointments, maybe we have a 5% conversion rate. I have to go listen to the offer call. That's what I have to listen to, right? Because like that's probably where the salesperson messed up, is if they're not converting into contracts and they have good appointments, they did everything right. So that was like, man, that was a huge thing for me, as far as like, I consider myself just a sales manager. I mean, we're obviously like the CEOs, COOs of our business, but like for me, I really just look at myself as a sales manager. Just like, that's my main like revenue driving activity, is sales on the acquisition side, sales on the dispo side. And so that helps me get a better idea of what calls to actually listen to and then where my team needs the most training. And it's always like I mean, I shouldn't say always, but typically it's like the same thing that we deal with on the same sellers. So like lately we've been dealing with like some kind of high-end California sellers, like that are just like, they're not distressed, but they could use our service, right? So we'll role play those people over and over. And like that was just like one part. I would say the whole other part, which I could jump into as well, is like being able to have the multiple exit strategies. That was something we weren't doing before, where, you know, we went down and like, we really knew that there was no chance they were going to work together after we went through our script, right? After we went through our sales process, it was a confident yes or no, which is a lot different than what we were getting before, which was like, and maybe they were interested, like, you know what I mean? Like it was harder to tell for sure. So,
like if they truly want to sell or not.
Right. And so like this, like being able to anchor, get people off the phone, that like really helped us like streamline our business, and we weren't spinning our wheels as much. We were pushing forward. You're like flipping upside down, by the way, dude.
Dude, my Wi-Fi did some weird shit, but I'm back. I was spinning.
Good, man. Glad you're alive. But yeah, that was the biggest thing for me, man, like with the sales process. Like the train, I hopped on like almost all of them that I could at the beginning, like really took that sales process and adopted it. And it helped us a lot.
So like what would be like, so for an example, how did you like go about like training your team, like on the sales process, like implementing it? Like what were some of the bigger challenges you faced?
Limiting belief is probably the biggest one, right? So like that they're going to say something. So this is, and you know, now I'm training more salespeople. And so it's always, I don't want to ask that tough question, because like, what if they get mad, right? Like what if they don't, or what if they don't like it?
Yeah.
And so like, you know, in your sales process, there are questions that you need to ask that are going to make a seller really think, right? They're going to think about the situation that they're in. And that's the goal that we have as salespeople. Our goal isn't to try to convince someone to sell us the house. It's just to make them think about things that they probably haven't thought about already, which has gotten them in the situation that they're in the first place, right? And so that was probably the biggest.
I want to pause right there. Say that again. That was really good. Say that again. Your job as a salesperson to do what?
Yeah, it's not to convince people to sell you their house or convince them to do anything, really. It's really to get them to think about, one, like why they're in the situation that they're in, and then how they can solve that problem, right? And so I can dive deeper into that a little bit, because I think sales gets like a really bad stigma, right? People are like, oh, greasy salespeople, right? And so like
you're a little greasy, by the way.
Exactly, 100%. I'm kind of sweaty. It's pretty hot in Medellin right now, but
and humid. I'm just kidding. Don't look greasy though.
No, I appreciate that. I always look at it because like I love sales, and so I was wondering why I like sales so much, and I feel like you can relate to this as somebody that's kind of an action taker and like relatively healthy, even though you eat pizza every day. But that's another conversation.
I've gotten off the pizza train a little bit recently.
Good for you, man. And so like, I'll give an example. So like people in my family kind of struggle with like weight, you know what I mean? Like they're not like the healthiest people. They're from Southern Louisiana. So like, you know, not the healthiest food out there, kind of a culture around eating. And I have friends like this too. And so like, I used to get really frustrated because I couldn't like get them to eat healthier and go to the gym. And it's people that I care about, right? And I was like, why can I not get these people to do this? They know it's best for them, but I can't get them to do it. And it's because I was trying to convince them. You know what I mean? I was like, you need to go to the gym. Like you need to do this, or this is going to happen. You're going to continue getting fat. Right. And so what I started to like realize is the better I can get at sales, the better I can convince people to do things that are actually better for them. Right. That are in their benefit. And so like, this was a huge thing that I took, and you guys really started me on this, like on this journey. which is like, man, a good sales process can kill this, which is like, started thinking like when I'm talking to my family, you start asking them more questions about like, hey, have you thought about like the possible ramifications of you kind of continuing the behavior that you're doing with like not working out and eating healthy? Like, have you thought about what that would look like in 20 years from now? And then are you really willing to settle for that if you didn't have to? Okay, so like, what do you think you should do right now? So that way you don't have to worry about being 20 pounds heavier than you are right now and overweight in 20 years. Like, what do you think you should do today? And then like, it's funny because when you get that sales process, it's not like it just translates to sellers, right? Where it's like, okay, like, have you considered that your way of thinking right now by chasing like the absolute highest offer is like what's gotten you in the position in the first place to where now the bank might foreclose on your home. And if you don't make a decision quickly, then you might end up losing, the entire home with all of the equity in it. Like, do you want to settle for that? Okay, perfect. Well, I'm here right now. So what should we do to take care of this? Right? Getting people to think like that, it transfers over into your sellers, into your relationships. Like when you're talking to your family, that family member that's smoking and overweight, it transfers to your employees or your team when you're trying to convey a message to them, right? It all comes back to the same thing. Like when you try to tell them what to do, it's not going to get you anywhere. But when you ask them the right questions to let them come up with it on their own and them realize that what you're asking, like, or what they're realizing is actually best for them, then that's how behavior changes. Like that's how behavioral patterns change. And so I just like, when I started learning that, it just got me into a rabbit hole. And you have to ask some questions that some people are going to be uncomfortable with answering. Like asking a fat person, what happens if they continue to eat like shit and they gain weight that's going to be uncomfortable. But all you're doing is you're getting them to think about the possible ramifications that they're actually ignoring, which are putting them in a worse spot to begin with. And so you're just trying to help them. It's the same thing with sellers. And a lot of people struggle with that. They don't want to ask the uncomfortable questions because they don't want to get yelled at. You know what I mean? Worst case scenario, you do get yelled at.
Yeah, and even if they do yell at you, I bet they call you back because they appreciate the tough question.
100%, man. And if you ask it, like, one of the things that I started changing is like, if you just ask it like, hey, and like, just to see if I could help, and then you say anything after that, chances are most of the people they're not going to like backfire. They're not going to get mad at you. It's just like a little line right before.
And even if you're like, look, I was just trying to help, when they do get mad, like they stop. They're like, oh, that's my fault. Like I apologize for that. Like
100%. Yeah.
It's so funny, bro. Happened to me just the other day.
Yeah. And so people
like immediately they apologize. Like, I'm so sorry. Like, it's just been a hard day. And then 100%. You can go deeper into whatever you're trying to dig into. Yep.
Yeah. So that was a good thing, man. Like listening to other calls of people that were going deep and getting the result. So that way that limiting belief doesn't stop the salespeople from asking the question. So like, oh shit, he asked that question and it got a good response out of it. So why wouldn't it work for me? But like you need to like show them the calls. You need to do it. And when you do that process, man, it works. It's proven.
It's like also the repetition, like too, like in role plays, it's like role playing the hard questions. Because then it does become like second nature as well. Like if that scenario comes up, you just like spit it out. You're like, oh fuck, I didn't mean to say that. Dude, it came out.
And that's another thing that we changed. And we can go into like why, but like really, as I came on, right, I started doing like the ops calls, the sales calls, and then a huge game changer was the call with Ren, where I learned a lot more about like sales leadership, right? Because we talk about sales process, we talk about like leadership in general, but like building a sales team, right? So that was some cool things that I got as well. And so now I do role plays every day. Like every day I do role plays in the morning. We do 30 minutes minimum sales training in the morning. And then for a while we were doing 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes in the evening, just strictly sales training. And so like that was a huge lever for our business because I mean, dude, that a 10% conversion could be another $40,000 in revenue. So
bro, going from 10-20% conversion rate doubles your business.
Literally. And it's just
5%
one lever.
to 20% is 4x.
And the process indicator is just role plays, right? Like how many role plays, how many call reviews can you do? And so like once we have that, we're at a point where we're converting at 28 to 31%. And we're getting, 75 to 80% lead to net lead. Now I know, okay, this is a scalable model, right? I just need to have more people that can do this and more than like this, the system's there. So, I guess like coming back full circle is like what changed a lot of that, man. A lot of like from where I was, and it's going to be crazy to see like where we're going to be in another like year or two, right?
That's sick. So like basically like just to like summarize that, like you just got a lot more predictability in your business.
Yeah. And efficient, man. Like predictability and efficiency, right? Because I guess like the efficiency like creates the predictability, right? Because like when you're not burning through leads and you know where all of the problems are, you know exactly where to focus. Now you have a predictable model. And so, yeah, like that, all of those things, were really, really helpful for me. Like, I think that like you need them in order to get to, I really think in order to get to 6 figures a month, like that's kind of what you need. Consistent, right? You need those processes.
Yeah. I think like realistically, like every single person who's made it to 6 figures a month that I know on that, and that's, we've also helped scale there. Like at this point, we've done 10 people or 10 different businesses. Like every single business has KPIs, a process, and then like it has a sales process basically. If you have KPIs and a sales process, it's pretty much like you can make it there. And it's like it can look different, right? Your team can be different, right? It could be like John, you have like an acquisition guy, you have a disco guy, you have a couple different people in your team. That's the way you did it. You have inbound leads. Other people do SMS, they have like a couple lead managers and they still close the deals. Like it's all like dependent on like what you want. Like the team, it's just those are the non-negotiables.
Yeah, the non-negotiables are processes and systems. Because without that, like it's just like I would just consider it like a side hustle. It's like
you'd still be like 30. Like without that, you're like 30K a month. Like that's every single person I see, like between 10 and 50K a month without processes and KPIs.
Yeah, because and I mean this is where I was, but you could probably tell me, you just don't know what you don't know. You don't know where your problems are.
No, you're blind, bro. Like imagine driving a car with a blindfold on, going 100 miles an hour, and just throwing money out the fucking side, bro.
That's I know. I feel like I can remember kind of being there, and I thought that was another cool thing. Like with some programs, and I won't talk bad about like a specific one, but like some programs are like, all right, man, like what do you want to work on? It's like I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, hopefully you have enough self-awareness to know. And I think once you get to a specific point in your business, you kind of always know what to work on. But like, I think like where you really get value, like especially starting out, is like, I don't know, man, tell me what I don't know. Like, tell me where I'm lacking. Like, that's what I wanted to see. So it's one thing to have, an idea of where you're lacking and then you're asking for ways to fix it. But I think it provides even more value where you don't really know where you're lacking. You don't know what systems you're missing, and somebody can look at it, diagnose it. I think that's why like the one-on-one coaching was so helpful, because like you're able to look at it, say, okay, this is where you're lacking. I didn't have to go fucking figure it out. You know what I mean? Because who knows how long that would have took me, where I was just like, okay, this is your problem. I think that was really helpful as well.
It's like the same, it's like the same psychology as when you give your sales guys a confident like MAO, and they know like their max offers this, like they're gonna do whatever they can. Like they're very confident in that number. It's like the same thing. It's like when you have a coach who tells you, even like thinking back to like sports and stuff, when your coach told you like you need to work on this, I'm like, you're right, dude. Like I didn't see that in my game, and like there you go, you just go and grind on that until you 100%. Execute it. And
because you don't know. Like I did the same thing because I think you said you wrestled. I did jujitsu, right? So like for the first, for the first year, I just tried to use my strength like all the time until my coach was like, "Dude, stop doing that. You're not going to get any better if you keep doing that. I know what to work on." And then like it makes it so easy to see now, but at the time, I just thought I was doing the best I could.
Dude, it's like okay, so like one of the things too that like I'm like slightly envious of, like looking back on people who are like just getting into the swing of business, or like even like some like some people who are just slightly too naive to like know the full picture of like how things work. So like, for example, like I just, like my brother, for example, is a great example of this, where he's just like, he's super talented and smart, but you just naive enough to like listen to anything you tell him, and then to just go and do it like balls to the wall. Like those are the people who get the best results like so fast.
100%. Yeah. And I think I'm that way too, where like, if I'm
Yeah.
just like, I think like if I just see somebody doing it and I'm like, okay, they're doing it, they tell me what to do, why would I not listen to them? Like, just go do it, just go find. And so I think like it's cool because being around like, you guys doing like multi 7 figures, and then like other people that are coaching for you guys like in the group also doing like huge numbers. I think, man, it's like, all right, cool, that's where I want to go. What would you do if you were me? And like, I would do this. Easy. I think it's a
I'll do it.
no-brainer. Yeah. And I'll always do like educational stuff like for that reason. I think it just is a no-brainer. It probably gets more expensive as you go up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think like Hermosi talks about it. Like he said he had to sell like 2/3 of his business so he could get the same education, like from the private equity people. Like he sold his business, like what, acquisition.com, or not acquisition.com, sorry, Gem Launch. Like what, 67 million, bro. That's crazy. Think about 67 million. And
but
just so
not?
they can, dude, I mean, it makes like, what's the difference, bro? Okay, you have 67 million versus like 400 million. Like who cares?
Yeah. And you learn that, like, once you learn it, no one can take it away. So
yeah, like you have that skill forever.
Yeah.
He said, I was listening to a podcast actually recently. He said that business, Gym Launch, grew 40% on its own just by improving efficiencies. And they were doing 30 million a year, and they grew 40% in 1 year. If you think of it, that's kind of boggling, bro. That's crazy.
Yeah. It makes sense though, because we find the same thing. So like, to give like a more tactical example for, I don't know, people that are like listening or like that are struggling getting leads on the phone. Sometimes it's simple. So one of the things that was really helpful for us this year is I have a lead manager on my team, and that I just gave her a number, and I was like, hey, your new number, like the only thing, and I got this straight from you guys, like your new number is lead to qualified lead ratio. Like you are going to call these leads 3 times a day, triple dialing them until you get them on the phone. And like, I don't care if they're mad when you get them on the phone, like you're going to get them on the phone. And like, sometimes they're mad, sometimes they're not, you know what I mean? Like, and the only way to know is to talk to them, make sure they're the right person. So, and then the actual qualified to appointment set, we actually have that on our AMs, but it's like, hey man, like 60%, all of our leads are inbound. I want to see 60% of our qualified leads to appointment set. That's your number. You know what I mean? Like that's like your, like everybody's reporting that at the end of the day. And it's like Hermosi talks about, if you're bad at finances, look at your bank account every day. Like if you just do that, you'll be better because you're facing the problem. It's the same thing with your numbers. If you just have someone on your team, like now at the end of the day, we do an end of day report. My lead manager posts her end of day, like what our lead to qualified lead ratio is, what our appointments to appointment set ratio is. We're looking at that like every single day, and just the awareness of it, of where it is, helps. Like it just gets better almost like magically, right? Like it's like, I don't know if it's manifestation, but just seeing it in front of us, like the number gets better.
Dude, normally what I've found is that generally when people do that and they get better magically, it's because they weren't doing everything the right way. And then like when they start doing it the right way, that's like, whoa, wow, we got this crazy pop. But in reality, people are actually just following the freaking process.
You're just doing like the things that you're supposed to do.
Another thing too, whenever like you do see KPIs off, it's like the question is like, is it the process that's wrong, or is it the people not following the process? And like, so it's like, that's like another like area to kind of observe a little bit. But I want to talk a little bit about, because I think you've gotten pretty good at hiring the right people and hiring good people for your team. So how would you find your talent, and like, what were you looking for in talent? I guess, what were you looking for in talent, like to bring on for an acquisition guy, and like, how'd you go about finding them?
So I don't know who told me this. Somebody gave me this like tip that I went overboard with, which was like, try to scare them away. And it could have been you.
Dude, I think it was me, bro. I said some shit about that for a while.
Yeah, like try to
Maybe
see
it
if
could
you
have been
could.
a lot of people though. I've heard a lot of people say it, so it may not have been me.
It very well could have been you. So as far as what I'm looking for with acquisition managers, I would say the number one thing that I'm looking for is discipline, like and like competitive drive, right? Like the most like type A person that just needs to win. That is going to be the best AM that I've seen, at least. They like, of course it comes with problems. You have big egos, you got big like that's gonna come with some problems, of course. But I don't care. Like I can deal with those problems. I want them to focus on numbers and revenue, right? Like they would need to be focused and driven by numbers and revenue. So the number one thing that I'll look for is like success, right? Like I'll look for like a success in prior roles. So I want to see people that are consistently at the top. No matter like what they were doing, like they're consistently at the top. They're competitive, right? Ideally, it's in sales. I think that you need to be a salesperson. I do kind of believe that some people just aren't naturally good at sales and they're never going to be number one. Doesn't mean that they can't learn to sell, but I think there is like some like you being highly driven and social will help you get there. So I look for like the drive, right? I look for like when they talk about their past roles, I want to see the people that are at the top. Like I was the top performing agent, I was the top performing salesperson at my last company. Like they typically just do well. The other thing is I like to ask them about like what were you doing on a typical day? How many calls were you making? How many appointments? And I want to know that I want to see them knowing their KPIs for themselves too. Like, oh, I'd make 80 calls and out of those 80 calls, I'd probably get, and it's different. Like maybe they get like 3 appointments. Maybe they were doing like just booking. I just hired somebody that was selling an SEO offer and he still knows his metrics. He knows how many appointments he gets, how many show up and how many he closes. It's a different ball game because they're showing up on like a Zoom call. So it's not as high volume, but like he knows what to do. Right. And so that's what I'll do at first is like I look to identify those things with them, right? And then what I'll start to do is after I role play with them, right? I want to see that I do the exactly like you taught, which is like the first call. I'll start to find out like I'll go through a role play and then I'll coach them. I want to see improvements on the second call. And then the third call is all me scaring them away. It's like, hey, this call, like you're gonna have to post your numbers every single day. And if you don't hit your numbers, like people are really going to be looking at you weird. You're not going to fit in here. Are you okay with that? Like, do you really think this is going to be a good fit? Hey, you need to lock up one contract in your first 30 days. It's going to be pretty hard. You don't even know this industry. You sure that you can do that? Like, you sure this is where you want to be? It's like, just like scaring them away. You know what I mean? Like, hey, this is really competitive. I would go overboard when I started. I was like, hey, everybody here is working from typically like 7 a.m. to about 11 p.m. Like, are you open to do that whenever you need to? And like a lot of the people that perform really well, they say yes. And like, I don't really hold people to that. I'm not like, hey, why aren't you working at 11? You know what I mean? But like my AM right now, dude, he just works when the job needs to get done. And so like sometimes that's 11. Sometimes I'm working at 11. I'm working 7 days a week a lot of times. They are too. And so like that's the kind of people that I want. And I understand some people are going to say, and maybe I'll look back at this like, in 10 years and say like that was an idiot. Some people are going to say like you can't create a culture like that. But I kind of say like, who the fuck are you to tell me how I can run my business? Like if I want to be around like just straight go-getters, like I come from like a Marine reconnaissance background. Like that's a certain culture of people and they're okay with weeding out a lot of weak guys. Right. They're okay with weeding out a lot of weak people. Like I'm the same with my business. I'm okay with having just very, very few like high top performing people. And I'm also okay with burning through like a lot of interviews to get there. Yeah, it's going to be harder, but I'd rather have a killer culture of people that I feel like I'm like, right? Like that are going to perform and have fun than just a bunch of like, I didn't hit my numbers, but it's okay. I'll do better next week. Right. So those are a couple of things I look for. I can go into tactics on hiring, but I
like that.
Yeah, I definitely do.
I
That
like,
was one of the big things that I changed is I used to just let anybody that wanted to work for me come work for me. And now I let almost no one. Like I really like, it's like, I really am particular with who I let on my team.
yeah, I think it's a good point because if you set the expectations up front, that it's going to be extremely hard. I'm thinking back to our best hires too. It's like, I remember like specifically, Ryan for Level Up.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
told this guy so many times, like, bro, like this is gonna be the hard, like you're gonna have no support and guidance, and it's gonna be the hardest thing you've probably ever done. He's like, dude, I'm your guy, bro, like over and over again, like 10 times.
Yes.
I'm like, so you're willing to like work like 60, 70 hours a week, like no problem, like doesn't even matter. He's like, dude, I don't care.
Yeah. He's a
I was like,
beast, dude.
perfect. I'm like, perfect, bro. And I was like, I don't
Yeah.
even need another interview. You know what I mean?
I know, man.
Like,
That's the thing. It's like, and a lot of people are like that, dude. There are people that
dude,
are just like, whatever, do
and
whatever it takes.
and like with what you're saying too is like if you hire people like that and you're like that, then you're gonna like them, respect them a lot more
Yeah.
because you don't have to worry about like are they putting the work in. It's more so just like are they coachable at that point, you know?
Yeah, 100%. And I think where a lot of people fuck up is everybody wants that, right? Everybody want like, I'm sure like people are gonna say, oh yeah, I want to find somebody that will work like 70 hours a week, but like, motherfucker, are you working 70 hours? Whoever they report to, are they working 70 hours a week? Because they're not going to respect somebody that's working 35 hours a week, logging off at 4 o'clock every day, like first one out of the office. If that's who they're reporting to, they're gonna have no respect for them. So like I do think
Mm-hmm.
that part of finding talent like that, you need to be willing to be there for them when they need it too. Like you need to give them the support because those type of people, they just want to get like they just want to do well. And they want to please you, whoever is above them, like they want that recognition. But if you're just kind of like, you're dipping out and you're like, yeah, dude, go figure it out. And you do that over a long enough time, they're gonna find somebody else that's willing to help them level up. You know what I mean? Like they're going to find a company that's willing to put more resources into them, that's willing to coach them more, that's giving them a better opportunity. Like they're going to find that. So I think like that's like what you just said, dude, which is like finding people like you. If you are a good example of somebody that works hard and is like fucking in it with them and will get in the trenches and is not afraid to make a phone call when you have to, they're gonna respect it, right? Like having like being like the fucking wartime CEO versus like the peacetime. I think like that's a
Mm-hmm.
huge part.
I agree.
So
I mean, bro, though it's the only like I really can't add on anything because I feel like you hit all the pieces pretty pretty well, dude. Um, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like it's the culture you want to build, and like obviously, John, you're like an ex-Marine, so you wake up at the same time every single day. You probably breathe on the same cadence throughout the day. Like, fuck, I don't even know, dude. But like, if you don't like, I guarantee you, like, if for example, someone like myself who's a little bit lax on like time, where I show up like usually like 1 or 2 minutes late for most things I do, which is just like that's just like my reality. I bet you would
yeah,
fucking want to strangle me.
yeah, 100%. But yeah, like, and that's the thing is like you kind of create the culture that you are though. Like, dude, Hermosi talks about this all the time that like you are basically the pinnacle of your culture. So like, however you show up, people are just going to be like a diluted version of that. So like, if you kind of show up not really caring, being lackadaisical, like this is your third priority, then like it's going to be their third priority too. But if you show up as like a killer, you show up ready to win every single day, I think that your team does the same thing just naturally. You know what I mean? Like they're gonna rise to like your level. They might not be as excited about it as you are. They might not work as hard as you will, but like they're gonna at least get a part of that of like being pumped. So
Yeah,
that's
dude,
another that's
it's a Tony Robbins like quote. I think about it every single day. It's like, did you maintain a high standard? Because people are going to fall to the level you let them fall to, and you're going to fall to the level that you let yourself fall to. That's just what naturally happens.
yeah, man.
And bro, he preaches that all the time. It's like maintain a high standard. That's like literally what he says. Like 99% of everything I see. It's like improve your happiness, keep a high standard. I'm like, geez, Tony Robbins, bro.
it's a simple message, but I think it works. And man, that's like a huge thing that I learned because I was in a accountability group with another mastermind I was in. What did they call me? They called me the Hammer. They said like I was like Jon the Hammer Lallande, and I got that nickname because I used to just fire people like left and right. Like I would just like I'd be like, yeah, guys, just fired another person, and it was like my weekly call. Like literally, like it was like every week it would be like, oh yeah, so I fired this guy this week, and like I was not proud of that by any means, and I still am not. I think that's like if you're firing people, that means you suck at hiring and you suck at keeping people and you suck at leadership. Like that is the exact like that is what happens when you fire somebody. That's a failure on you as the leader when you fire somebody. It's not a failure on them. And so I think like one of the things that I really learned from you guys was like also being able to have the talk tracks with people that you know, like, hey, how can we work through this? Like, what should you do? Right? Like, what should you do so that what do you need from me so that I can help you achieve X goal? Right? How can I help you? What should you do to get there?
The similarities between leadership and sales are like just the differences. Like you're not trying to get them to pay you.
Literally, like well, technically,
I mean, like
they make you money
like
though.
There's like a few. Well, yeah. I mean, there's a few other things that's different, but like in the grand scheme of things, sales and leadership is basically like you summed it up in one word. It's like we did a leadership training thing. It's called, if you could sum leadership up in 2 words, it's called behavior change. Sales behavior change, and like if you do it really well, you know it's big. And the difference between manipulation and leadership is that you're doing it in someone's best interest.
Yeah, that's it. 100%. And dude, and I would say sales, leadership, and recruiting. So I use the same sales process in my recruiting process as I do talking to leads. So I'll open it up and I'll talk to them about, hey, tell me like, you know, how you're doing at your current company. Do you like it? If you could change anything about it, like what would you change? Right. And then like finding those out. And so like maybe they're like, oh, the leads. Okay. When you say the leads, like what kind of impact is that having on like your closing ratio? Find out like the difference between where they're at and then where they want to be, and then just be the person that can close that gap. And like that's basically like finding out what exactly it is that they need and what motivates them and what drives them to change. That's literally how most of the stuff that works for us, like how it works. Everything else is just following like dummy proof systems.
Yeah, it's pretty much like learn sales, learn systems, and then you have 100K a month business.
I would say that's easily. I don't know what comes after that. Like I don't know what it takes. I can't tell you what it takes to get to 7 figures a month yet, but I can't. Well, maybe we'll have this call again in 3 years.
Yeah, that's right. From my observations of people at that point, it's definitely hiring at scale and leadership at scale.
Yeah.
And the big thing that I know as well is boosting your return on investment so that you are able to install the layer of leadership and still be profitable.
Like like a good C-suite, like a good
yeah, exactly, a good group of directors or whatever it is.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, hopefully we have this call in like I don't know, a couple of years, and maybe not even a couple, maybe just 1 or 2, and we're talking about that exactly.
That's right, dude. Let's fucking do it.
Oh yeah,
let's do it. All right, John, I appreciate you, bro. Do you have anything that's like you feel like just like other than just we've obviously left I think there's been a lot of nuggets in this conversation, but do you have anything that you'd want to leave, like someone who's maybe stuck at that, you know, a deal month range, 10 to 50K kind of numbers per month? Like what would be some advice you have for that person?
I think like if you're at 10 to 50K a month, obviously we just talked about a lot of things that you could do like tactically, but there's also the things that you don't really know that you could be doing wrong. So whether it's like hiring a coach or just finding someone that's doing what you're wanting to do, paying them for just their time to look at your business for an hour, like that could be the one thing that gets you over to the hurdle. It could just be one thing that you're doing wrong. It could be like, oh, no wonder that you aren't, you know, you're not closing because you're doing this in your offer call. Like it's automatically shooting you in the foot. So I would say like get somebody that's above you to look at what you're doing, and they could probably tell you, like, that's the fastest shortcut. It's like a cheat through life.
Mhm.
And then other than that, man, like, don't get shiny object syndrome, because when you're at, like, I know that was a huge thing when I was at 10 to 30K a month, which I don't deal with anymore. It's like, oh, sub 2 and fucking flips and rentals, and I bought a hotel and like all this stupid shit, where now I'm literally selling all of my fucking real estate, because I'm like, I know where my time is best spent. I know where my thing is. So I'm gonna spend my best time there and then fucking invest passively in other ways.
Oh yeah, I love it. I love it. We do have one question.
Yeah.
Can you open it up and read it and answer it?
Yeah. Are you connected? So are you connected with everyone in your team all day, like on Zoom? Do I get real good virtual lead manager? Two, do I get real good? How do I get good lead manager? So to answer your first question, I have heard people doing that, like a virtual chat room where they can, everybody's dialing and everything like that. I think it's a distraction personally when you have like a person that's high enough drive. Like, if they're really doing the thing that they're supposed to be doing, they're not going to want to be around anybody else. Like when I work, I don't want any distractions where I can hop on and like catch up with somebody. I'm like, hey, I'm 100% focused on work, or I'm intentionally taking like 30 minutes away from my computer where I'm just like sitting on my patio, like breathing, because like I'm trying to just like recoup. Right. And so like that's how like top performers will typically work. I don't really believe in the like virtual, everybody get on a Zoom call so you feel like you're in an office. I used to work in an office, and I think it's a giant waste of time. I think everybody wants to talk to each other, and I'm sure there's some good like culture that comes out of it. But like personally, I think that people talk to each other too much, and I think it's a waste of time. So I'll say that on the record. Second, how do I get a really good virtual lead manager? Just like you would any other employee. So open up your funnel just like you would for your leads, right? The more, it's like this simple, the more people that you interview, the better candidate options you're going to have. And so I would set like, all right, if I'm going to do a virtual, I get a lead manager, let's say you're stateside, go to Wise Hire. You're going to get a huge funnel of people that come in. Or like, wherever you end up doing, there's a ton of like recruiting services, like hire train
Upwork
VA.
is like Upwork's a good one too.
Yeah. So like I would want to look through probably 400, 300, 400 applications personally. And then out of those, I probably would want to have about 40 interviews, like 40 initials. I know it sounds like a lot, but like if you want a good team, like you have to do a lot of work. So it's just what it is. But like I would do like 40 at least initials. And then out of those, maybe you get 5 like really good candidates and try to scare them all away. Whoever fights for it the hardest probably is your best fit. So like that's how I would go and go after and try to get my lead managers. You might not have that sort of time. So if you do, you can obviously lower that funnel until you have more time. But eventually you want to get to where you have like a really open funnel for your hiring. That will help your business go a really long way.
Sweet. All right, John. Appreciate you, bro. And I will talk to you on Thursday, probably.
Yeah. I'll see you. I will see. I was like, wait, are you going to be in Colombia? I thought you were going to be. I thought you were talking about it here. Later, brother. I'll see you later.
All right, bro. Peace.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.